So, good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the ADHD Reframe Project with me, host Emma Craven. And today, Kai, I'm joined by Kai. So, would you like to just introduce yourself a little bit, please?
Sure. My name is Kai Northcott. I am the founder of 8 Seasons Consulting. This is my logo back here, which is also a teaching tool. I work with an organizational model that is based on the natural rhythms of the day and the year that helps us tune in with the natural rhythms of our brains and bodies so that we can work with our brains and bodies instead of against them in all aspects of our lives.
So, how did you get into this work then? It's fascinating.
Yeah, so for me, it all started with the model. I was introduced to this 8 part model in a very different context, 16 years ago now, in the context of outdoor education, nature connection, working summer camps and homeschool programs and things like that. We use this 8 part model that's based on the eight seasons of the year. Basically, if we take the 4 seasons and divide those into early summer, early winter, late winter, now we have 8 seasons of the year. And in the same way, we can have the 8 seasons of the day. And so then we were using this model to design the 8 seasons of each day of summer camp, plus the 8 seasons of the week of summer camp. And I just really fell in love with this model, started applying it to all different aspects of life and business. That led to me consulting some entrepreneur friends on applying the model to their business. That led to me founding 8 Seasons Consulting. And in 2021, when I started making social media content, that was when I started realizing that I was neurodivergent. Growing up, I had no idea that my brain worked differently than people around me. I always thought I was just like a little weird, and then turns out a lot of these unique personality traits that I had that nobody else around me had. Turns out there's a whole community of people worldwide who share similar personality traits because it is uh, aspects of being neurodivergent. Uh, so through 21 and 22, in the process of making social media content about this model and about ADHD and autism, what I've learned is that while a lot of people might be helped by this model, while this model could be useful for a lot of different people, people with ADHD are actively looking for a different relationship to time, a different way of relating to time and to their brains and to their bodies. And this provides one pathway to that. And so that was when I started niching down into ADHD. But for me, it all really rests on this model.
So, when were you diagnosed?
Yeah, so in 21, I started thinking that I had ADHD, and then if you're on social media much, you know that the pipeline from ADHD content to autism content is pretty short. So I started seeing autism content pretty quickly, and started thinking that maybe that explained some of how my brain worked. And so I ended up going to a psychiatrist in 22 and got a full psych evaluation, and he ended up diagnosing me with autism, depression, PTSD, but not actually ADHD. He said that
Okay.
even though a lot of the ways that I present in the world and a lot of the things that I struggle with are similar to things that ADHD people struggle with, it's caused by a different confluence of factors.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, it always makes me kind of think because obviously different doctors will possibly kind of follow different guidelines. But yeah, that's interesting. So for you, the autism, how does that turn up for you then during the day? Is it different each day or is it the
Yeah, great
same?
question. Um, So first, I want to respond to something that you said about different doctors following different guidelines, and
Hmm.
it's really true. Even though there is, there's the diagnostic standards manual that's supposed to be just like very tick tick tick. At the same time, what I've learned through this diagnostic process is how subjective it is. This specific doctor, he specializes in differentiating autism from PTSD. And he said, the way that you present in the world, the way that you answer these questions, you could go to 5 different doctors and 3 of them might diagnose you with ADHD. It's a much more subjective process than I realized. So as far as how Oh, well, I want to say one other thing about that real quick. The reason that it can get so subjective is that there's this checklist of symptoms or signs or whatever. But then at the end of every entry in the DSM, it says, and these symptoms can't be more easily explained by a different diagnosis. And so that's the part where it becomes subjective, is which is the easiest explanation, which one fits the criteria the most, because there's really a lot of overlap in presentation in a lot of these different neurodivergences. So that's how it gets so subjective. But as far as how autism shows up for me, um, it actually it just so happens that there are also 8 aspects of autism. A lot of people talk about the 8 pillars of autism. That is totally separate from this model, but I have found a way in which it overlays. But so often when we talk about the autism spectrum, people think that it's a spectrum of not very autistic to very, very autistic, and that it's like a straight line, and that things, the experience of autism just increases the further up the spectrum we go. And that's really not the way it works at all. Turns out there are these 8 different aspects of autism, things like sensory sensitivities, emotional difficulties. Um, did I just say emotional difficulties or social difficulties?
Emotional.
Okay. So social difficulties, emotional dysregulation, aggression, I forget what the other 4 are, but on each one of these aspects of autism, somebody can be high or low.
Yeah.
And that's why so often people don't look autistic. They don't seem autistic. They don't act autistic because the aspects of autism that we are kind of socially trained to expect to see from someone, they might not struggle with that, but they struggle with other things that we don't see as much. Maybe they do really well with social interactions, but they really struggle with sensory sensitivities and emotional regulation. So for me, a lot of it is in sensory sensitivities, emotional regulation. A lot of my autistic struggles are more internal. I do also I get very obsessed with things and really do deep dives into whatever I'm excited about at the time. And I think those are probably the biggest ways: sensory sensitivity, emotional regulation, and having deep, deep interest in my special interests.
Yeah, yeah. The reason I'm asking is because I am diagnosed with ADHD, and I've not been diagnosed with autism, but people say to me regularly that I've definitely got autism as well. And yeah, it's just not something that I may or may not get diagnosed with it. But for me, what you've just said there, that really resonates, because I have issues with sensory, like I get very overstimulated
Mhm,
very quickly.
mhm,
And it's normally to kind of loud noises, or really things that are really bright, or even just really bad or smells, like things that are really overpowering. And I just get to a point where I feel like I just need to shut everything off. Um,
mhm,
and obviously, the emotional dysregulation is part of having ADHD, but like you, I've been diagnosed with complex PTSD as well. So,
mhm,
the overlap for all of these things um, is massive. So I like the fact that you've just said that a lot of your struggles are internalized, um,
mhm,
because I think that's a really important point to make, to each other and to ourselves, but also to the listeners as well. So yeah, thank you for kind of highlighting that. It's not, you see, I know so much about ADHD, but when it comes to autism, I lack the knowledge, and maybe that's something that I should go away and do. But yeah, so when people come on and want to talk about it, I find it fascinating. So
Yeah, it is.
specifically because, go
It
on,
is so
sorry.
fascinating. No, you're fine. It is really fascinating. We're learning so much about autism right now. In the last 20, 30 years, we've been learning, especially really in the last 10 or 20, we've been learning so much about how the traditional
Oh,
autism diagnosis is really one archetype within the whole multidimensional spectrum of how autism shows up in people. Just
yeah,
like with ADHD, we're learning that the diagnostic criteria are essentially based on young white boys, and that both ADHD and autism show up really differently in people who are socialized differently than young white boys are. And there, I want to mention a resource. I think I want to do the metaphor first, actually. So I just saw yesterday, I think somebody was describing a metaphor for their autistic child, how they show up at school, that it's almost like origami, where at school, what the other people at school see is the child as a piece of origami. They're in this really beautiful shape and they have all these neat lines and everything. And there's like from the outside, there's nothing wrong with them. And what they don't see is how much effort it took for them to fold themselves up into that shape and how much
yeah,
effort it takes to unfold from that shape when they get home. And they don't see the crease lines that are left on them from folding up into that shape day after day. And so I thought that was a really good metaphor for how autism can show up and be easily masked. But I wanted to also mention a resource real quick. There's an online autism assessment called the RADS-R. It's RAADS-R. And that specific assessment has been reviewed by multiple independent research groups who agreed that it is 97% accurate. That if you take their test and score above their threshold, that there's a 97% chance that you would get diagnosed with autism from a doctor. And 97% accuracy from an online assessment is pretty much unheard of. And especially with there being so many unspoken ramifications to an official autism diagnosis being part of our medical records, where some countries won't let us immigrate. It can make it difficult to access certain things. Uh, Autism can be used against someone in divorce proceedings, custody proceedings. Uh, So, for a lot of people who are curious about it, but don't necessarily want all of that to be part of their medical record, the RADS-R can be a really, really good resource.
yeah. I mean, that makes me feel really sad that there are probably thousands or millions of people in the world for them exact reasons that would never seek a diagnosis.
Yeah,
And this is
absolutely.
why platforms like this podcast is really important to talk about these things because, think of all of the people that are sitting there struggling or just, are finding life, sorry, really challenging, but are too scared to kind of go and get help or be assessed. It's like,
Yeah.
it just breaks me. It actually breaks my heart because I just think it's like we have so much to offer, but unfortunately still the world still doesn't, certain countries, clearly certain cultures, certain anything, and then people don't necessarily feel safe to disclose what's going on for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just think that's so sad. It is so
Yeah,
sad.
it really is.
So
Yeah,
sad.
it
So
really is heartbreaking. And
have
even
you
when people, okay,
no, go. I can keep my question.
I was going to say, even when people do have an official diagnosis, then it's still a question of where do I disclose this? If I disclose this to my employer, is that going to result in them offering me accommodations? Or is that going to result in me being quietly over time, my role is shifted and my hours are cut, and then there's not really room for me in the organization? And so, yeah, it's a really big question of where we disclose it, largely, in large part, because there's not a whole lot of resources out there for adults with ADHD. There are, sorry, for adults with autism. Um, there are plenty of cons of like how it might impact me in the workplace, immigration, all these different things. But then when we compare that to the list of pros of getting an official diagnosis and disclosing it, it's like, oh, what are the pros to that? What's the official help that I can receive? Where's the support network that's offered by society or by the government? There's not really help in that way. So I think that is something that is going to shift in the next couple of decades is people remembering on a day-to-day basis that autism isn't just for kids, that autistic children grow up and that we still need help.
Yeah, of course. And again, a really, really, really like vital point that you've just made there. And I think, as adults, because we've been diagnosed as adults, hopefully we can kind of make it a little bit easier for generations that are following us, and even as early as school children, and try and kind of, even teach them that there is nothing wrong with them. They're just different, which is what I choose. I choose to call me and my ADHD and all of the mental health stuff. And my psychiatrist said that I've got a complex personality, and I didn't really know how to take it because I didn't really know what to say. Um, but it basically just said that I've got a complex personality because of childhood trauma, and I'm like, yeah. And I think the older that we are when we do get not diagnosed, unfortunately, means that we do carry a huge amount of trauma with us, don't we? And it's just unpacking that and trying to make sense of it, and then trying to kind of live a life that is worthwhile, where we can thrive, which I know is not always possible, but
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot in there for sure. There are ways in which complex PTSD, especially ongoing, if the trauma is ongoing, then that can rewire our brain in ways that are physically very similar to autism. So it can be really hard to tell those two apart. Um, and then there's another piece about how being autistic in a neurotypical world, some people say that that's inherently traumatic, that unless our environment is designed with our needs in mind, we're going to encounter trauma on an almost daily basis. Trying to fit in at school, sensory sensitivities, trying to express our emotions and being told that that's the wrong way to do it, or being even punished for expressing our emotions. So there's a deep and complex relationship between PTSD and autism for sure.
and I know for a lot of women as well. I speak to women
Mhm.
regularly, and I've had quite a few women guests on this podcast, and I think, we're, late diagnosed adults, whether that's autism, ADHD, or both, or PTSD, or whatever it is. I think for women, the complex PTSD seems to be, unfortunately, a reoccurring theme, because we've gone unnoticed, or even it's only just been in the last 10 years, maybe max, that finally it's been acknowledged that women do have ADHD and autism. It's not just solely for ADHD. And then it's, obviously the society's trying to catch up, but I think, unfortunately, um when you get to, the older you are when you get diagnosed, then sadly, I think there's more comorbidities, or more kind of as well as, um,
Mhm.
and yeah, so it's just about, talking about these conversations and opening them up, and, just being honest, like, that's all I have to offer. When I say to
Yeah.
guests when they come on here, I'm like, I'm bonkers, chaotic, I'm messy, I'm just time blind, everything and anything, but I'm funny, and you're never gonna kind of get a different conversation than an honest one.
Yeah.
And it's all I really kind of wanted to kind of do with this podcast. But yeah, so have you experienced any difficulties not just with your PTSD, but with your mental health as a whole? Have you had to kind of, I don't know, advocate for yourself?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it was only in 2022 that I was diagnosed with autism, depression, and PTSD. And it just reframed so much of my life, made me see so many different things I experienced in a completely different light. Um, so yeah, it's hard to name a specific struggle, but yeah, I would just say that mental health, managing depression, also managing addiction because that runs in my family and is easy for me to fall into as well. Um, Managing autism, PTSD, yeah, I mean, it's a part of everyday life. And I think that we get so used to that, and it just becomes our normal, and
Yeah,
we don't realize that there's a different way that life could be so much easier. Um, a metaphor that I've seen is that going undiagnosed until adulthood is like playing a video game on hard mode and not knowing that it's on hard mode. And then eventually, as an adult, you get told that it's on hard mode, and that doesn't change the difficulty of the levels, but it does let you know that you are playing a different game than some of the people around you, and that some of the things that work for them won't work for you, and that some of the support that you need, they don't need, and that's okay. And that we all have different needs in that way. And one other thing I wanted to mention real quick is that for in the DSM-5, which is the most recent, which was published in 2013, that's the first edition of the DSM that said that you could have ADHD and autism at the same time. Before that, the DSM said that you could not have both ADHD and autism. So anybody who got diagnosed before 2013, your doctor was trying to decide, do you have ADHD or do you have autism? Now, since 2013, what we've learned is not only can they coexist, it's actually more common for them to exist together than to exist independently. And so anybody who was diagnosed before 2013 with either condition, I always recommend it's at least worth thinking about the other
yeah,
condition as well, because it is so common for them to occur together.
um, yeah. Wow. Honestly, I'm barely lost for words. But yeah, I
Uh,
didn't realize it was that. I mean, 2013. Did you say 2013? Yeah,
13. Yep.
it's what 13 years ago. That's
Mhm.
what.
Right.
It- my brain is just like what? It's like oh yeah. Yeah, I don't even know if I can comment on that or say anything about that at the moment because I'm just like, well, I thought we were a little bit further forward than that.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to realize how recent so many things were. The not only with mental health, but so many things in society. There are lots of people alive who were still alive in segregation in the US who were a part of the civil rights movement. And, we talk about things like they're so far in the past, but they're not. They're still here. They're still very, very present. So yeah, it's just amazing how easy it is for us to forget the way things were just a little while ago and to think that the way that things are now is the way they've always been and the way that they always will be, which is definitely not true because next year we'll learn something else about ADHD and autism that'll help it all make so much more sense than it does right now. And we'll think, gosh, how could we ever think what we thought in 2026?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a good point. But still, it's like it's only I'm still like it's 13 years ago.
Mhm,
Like I've
mhm.
oh goodness. But you just to go back a little bit, you just pricked
Sure.
my attention when you mentioned addiction. I enjoy talking. I don't enjoy talking. Yeah, I like to talk about it because I think it is an
Oh,
area that is hardly kind of acknowledged or spoken about.
mhm.
And you've mentioned it. So I have personal experiences with addiction, alcoholism, and it runs in my family.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, would you be open to just discussing a little bit of your experiences with that, or it doesn't matter if you say no? I'm not going to be offended.
Yeah, yeah. I can talk about that a little bit. So for me, it started really early. I started using cannabis at 16 really regularly. I had had cannabis a few times before that, but 16 was the one I started using really regularly. And while people really love to say that cannabis is not physically addictive, anything can be emotionally and psychologically addictive. Um, and there's also evidence now that cannabis is physically addictive, but that's a whole other conversation. By the time I was 18, and I don't like I don't like the frame that cannabis is a gateway drug. It's not necessarily the first thing that people do, and just because people do that doesn't mean that they'll do other things. Um, but that was a little bit of a pathway for me, was that I used cannabis first. I mean, of course, I used alcohol before that, which is the real gateway drug in this country, or in I think in most countries. Um, so alcohol, a little bit of alcohol as a teenager, then heavy cannabis use at 16 and 17. And then when I was 18, I started using crystal methamphetamine hydrochloride.
Okay, hardcore.
Yeah. So I used crystal meth pretty much every day for only about a year and a half. Um, I I was able to quit when I was 20. Um,
That's incredible.
but
Well done.
oh, thank you.
Seriously, that is incredible.
um, And, quitting, of course, was really difficult. What it really took was just changing my whole life. you know, quitting going to all the things that I used to go to, quitting talking to all the people that I used to talk to, changing my phone number, moving, just like completely exiting the situation. Um, and since then, I think in my experience, pretty much everything is easier to quit than that was. And so it's like, yeah, I can smoke tobacco for a little while and then just put it down. It's like, well, I crave it, sure, but not as much as I crave crystal meth. So like,
Mm,
whatever, it's fine. um, and so I guess since then, it's been pretty easy for me to pick something up and start doing it. And then at some point, I notice I'm like, oh, I'm using this an unhealthy amount. I should stop. Uh, and Something that I think about a lot is replacement behaviors, where it's very difficult to tell someone, hey, just stop doing this thing that you do every day. It's like, okay, well, what am I going to do instead? And having an instead is really, really important for people. And, in a most ideal world, maybe instead of using substances that are, let's say, a hardcore substance like crystal meth or heroin, um, instead of doing that, we are exercising. We're going to the gym every day. Sure, that's a great ideal. That's awesome. And if cannabis helps you quit crystal meth, I think cannabis does less harm than crystal meth. And so, you know, I I think that replacement behaviors are really important. I noticed that at a lot of AA meetings, there's a lot of coffee, there's a lot of sweets. Sugar is something that people turn to a lot after alcohol. Caffeine is something that people turn to a lot after alcohol. Uh, and so I think it's just important to recognize the power of replacement behaviors and to not think that we have to completely rewire our brains to not crave anything ever, but that it's okay to crave things. We just need to make good choices about what those things are.
Yeah. I mean, I am studying psychology at the moment, and I wrote a paper. My first essay I ever wrote was on addiction, the psychology of addiction, and I know a lot about addiction. I've been clean since 2007, sober since 2019, and I thought I knew quite a lot about addiction. Um, but actually I knew a very small part of it. And, having read so much about it since then, um, has really opened my eyes, particularly how the reward pathways in the brain can rewire themselves to seeking that reward all the time, even if there's no substance involved. So it could
Mhm,
be around, food, sex, shopping. It doesn't have to be, and and as well, you can be your brain structures and processes can change if you're negative all the time. So if you're just thinking or seeing negativity all the time, it actually does change
mhm.
the the neurotransmitters in your brain. And I think that's kind of, yeah, and it's so easy. I think as neurodivergent adults, it is very easy for us to become um I wouldn't say addicted, but reliant upon certain behaviors, certain substances. For me, it's nicotine at the moment. And yes, it's not bad. It's not good for me. But it sometimes serves a purpose when I get really stressed. But it's,
Yeah.
trying to kind of live a healthy life without, acting out or without kind of doing anything is sometimes can be really challenging,
Yeah,
don't you think?
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think having those, like I said, replacement behaviors where, sure, smoking tobacco is not the best thing for us, but if what we used to do to deal with stress was to shoot up, then smoking a cigarette is great. Do that instead. you know, and maybe eventually the tobacco will get replaced with something else that does less harm, and maybe that'll get replaced with something else that's actually beneficial. But I think that being patient with the journey and giving ourselves a lot of grace on that journey of less and less harm, I think that's a really important part of the process. And I think something else to keep in mind is that, what you're saying is true about how the brain rewires itself around addiction. And for a long time, the accepted model in the scientific community was that that change is permanent. That once the brain is wired for addiction, that the brain is always wired for addiction and will always be addicted to something. And what we have learned in the last few years is that that's actually not true. And that in the same way that we can rewire our brain for addiction, we can also rewire our brain to eliminate or reduce those addictive patterns and behaviors, and that rewiring happens on a physical neurological level.
Yeah. And I think as well, once conversations like these are opened up and we remove the huge amount of shame that we may or may not carry with us, um, then I think then that it enables each individual person to be able to move past that. Because just because you become reliant on a substance or you become reliant on a behavior, and then you start step by step just kind of taking better care of yourself, you can still carry that shame with you. And that shame,
Oh, sure.
unfortunately, can be really toxic and can push you back in to like
Mhm.
the lion's den, let's say. I don't know where that came
Mhm.
from, but it can almost, like, the feelings of shame and guilt can just become so overpowering and overbearing that you have to kind of go back to what you were doing before. And well, you feel like that's your only option when it's not, and
Mhm.
I found that just by talking to a friend or to my partner about how I'm feeling kind of takes that shame, it takes the extents, like the overwhelming kind of feelings of the day or of the week or whatever it is. I think, just removes that kind of that go-to, if that makes sense. That go-to.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm really glad that you're framing it that way because it ties in with a couple of really famous experiments. So you've probably pretty much everybody listening has probably heard about the experiment. I think it was in the 80s when they offered rats water or water with cocaine in it. And that when they had these two choices, that the rats would consistently choose the water with cocaine to the point that they would forego food. And the published result of this study, which became a part of culture for decades, was that these addictive substances are so addictive and rewire the brain so strongly that people are willing to give up food. They're incredibly dangerous for these reasons. Have you heard about the more recent study that revisited these results? This is fascinating. So in
Yeah,
so in the
please.
original experiment,
Yeah.
the rats were in isolation.
Yep, I
One
have
rat
heard it. I'm looking forward
in
to,
one
yes, sorry, I have
cage.
heard it, but please, yeah,
Yep.
carry on because
One
I'm
rat in
intrigued.
one cage, completely isolated, no other rats, nothing to do. If you put
Yeah,
me in a cage and offered me, "Do you wanna sit around and do nothing, or do you wanna sit around and do nothing while you're high on cocaine?" Sure, I'll sit around and do nothing while I'm high on cocaine. What else am I
yeah,
doing? But when they put those same rats in a community, when they had a big cage with lots of rats, different ages of rats, different sexes of rats, there are things to do within the cage, things to play with, uh, various ways for them to play independently and play with other rats. Suddenly, all of the rats lost interest in cocaine.
yeah,
So, turns out the antidote to addiction isn't education, it's not shame, it's not guilt, it's connection.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, that I did. Sorry, once you started explaining it, I am aware of that. That recent study, but yeah, it's yeah, connection. And I know that that's maybe hard for some people. It may not be so hard for others, but I think it's really important for all of us to have at least one person or two people that we can reach out to and just talk openly and honestly to. And I think it's really important for um, just for anyone that's either listening or knows someone who is listening but knows someone that's having a really hard time. Like, that's such a powerful message. How can we reframe addiction in the people that are it's in the thick of it, maybe just needs someone to talk to, maybe needs someone to just, give them a little gentle help with the first step forward in, changing their lifestyle. And it's really important to kind of highlight them things. So thank you so much. Have you got any more? Because I love a little metaphor, or I love a little anything like anagram or yeah. So please, if you've got any more.
Gosh, that's a really broad question. I'm not quite sure how to answer that. I want to see if there's anything else I want to say about addiction real quick. Oh, I think a piece around guilt and shame, I think it's really important to remember, like you said, it's so easy for us to feel shame and guilt as a person that struggles with addiction because society teaches us that addiction is an individual problem. It's a moral failing, it's a problem of self control, it's, y in so many different ways, it's framed as that person is making a mistake and they're failing in some way. And what we're not recognizing is how much society is structured like the first experiment.
Yeah,
Society is structured where we live in our little boxes, we're by ourselves, we have very little connection with other people, And so it's natural for us to want to make ourselves feel different with an external substance, to feel different than the loneliness, the boredom, the sadness. And I think the real grief that we have from lacking that connection, from lacking community. And so connection is the antidote, community is the antidote, and it's also difficult to create. It's difficult to create consistent community. It's difficult and vulnerable to create connection, even with individuals.
Yeah.
And so I just hope that people can have a lot of grace for themselves in the journey and to recognize that society is structured in such a way that it makes these choices really difficult. And society is structured in such a way that it makes it easy to turn to substances. And that substances are incredibly common in society. Caffeine and alcohol are ubiquitous in society. But then as soon as, it's cute, it's kitsch to have a shirt or a mug that talks about how addicted to coffee you are. But if you then talk about how you're addicted to a different stimulant, then somehow you're a bad person. You've failed morally. So I think it's just really important to keep in mind that substances are everywhere. They are ubiquitous in society. People use them all the time, and that we can make good choices about which substance we use and when, and that when we have a craving for substances, a really good question to ask ourselves is, do I actually need connection right now? And how can I create that in my life?
Yeah. Wow. Yes, so it's almost like you just pause for a minute and just see what's going on for you in the moment, because it might be that you don't want the substance, you need the connection. So yeah, wow, I don't even know what to say. That's twice now, lost for words. Rarely happens for me, but yeah, yeah, I don't. So tell me, we're just going to go because I don't really know what to say to that. I just think you've said that so beautifully that the listeners, I hope, genuinely hope that you can reach somebody and they will realize just exactly what you've just said. Um, but I wondered if maybe you wanted to talk about how you got into the work that you're doing at the moment, how you help entrepreneurs. Um,
Sure.
I mean, social media and content creation. I'm I'm very lacking, but I give it a good go. But it doesn't really work well for me. But I do know that you support, entrepreneurs, and I do know that you do quite a niche job. So I'm interested to know a little bit more about that, please.
Yeah, I'd love to chat about that a little bit. Um, yeah, so like I said, the work that I do, for me, it evolved out of working with this organizational model that's based on the natural rhythms of the day and the year. And so for me, that's really the deeper goal of my work, is to help people connect with their brains and bodies, connect with the natural rhythms of the day, of the year, of the natural world around us, and the natural rhythms of our own bodies, and to reestablish a relationship with time where we recognize that the linear, precise nature of clock time is a thin veneer over the natural state of time, which is cyclical. It moves faster at sometimes and slower at others, both subjectively in our brains and in the outside world. That the connection with ourselves and the defining a different relationship with time, for me, that's the deeper work. That's why I do the work that I do. But what it looks like on the surface is helping people structure their days, weeks, and work sessions to get more work done in less time. And the way that we get more work done in less time is by resourcing ourselves. So often when I first get on the phone with people, they they want to talk about, I'm not focused when I sit down at my desk. Can you help me be more focused when I sit down at my desk? Yeah, absolutely. Let's back up a little bit. What's your day like when you wake up? Well, I wake up and lay in bed for 3 hours while I'm stressing about my day. And I'm scrolling on my phone, and then I get up around 11, and then I try to get to my desk. Like, okay, that's a difficult way to start the day. Let's back up a little bit more. When do you go to bed? Well, I stay up until 1 a.m. scrolling on my phone. Like, okay, so it's going to be really difficult to feel focused at your desk when that's how you wake up and that's how you go to bed.
Yeah.
So before we start talking about structuring our work session, let's talk about structuring our day. And I use the term structure a lot, but I think it's really important to remember that I'm talking about a flexible structure. Structure is one of these things that people with ADHD can have a love hate relationship with, where, we want structure, but we hate structure. We create structure, and then we rebel against the structure. And so I
Yeah.
work with flexible structures where instead of saying, I'm going to wake up at 7 a.m. and then I'm going to do 30 minutes of yoga and then I'm going to meditate for 15 minutes and then I'll have a super healthy breakfast at 7 a.m. and then I'll sit down at my desk at 8 a.m. ready to go. Something that detailed is helpful for a lot of people. And for most people with ADHD, something that detailed is a recipe for disaster because it is setting ourselves up for feeling like a failure. Where if I tell myself that I'm going to start yoga at 7, but then I don't start yoga until 7:05, I might be beating myself up for starting yoga 5 minutes late instead of celebrating the fact that I'm doing yoga pretty early in the morning,
Yeah.
right? Because I set this arbitrary time that I didn't meet. Now I'm a failure for doing yoga late instead of winning for doing yoga at all.
Yeah.
And so instead, I work these flexible structures where we, when we wake up, we do something to wake up the mind. And that might be reading for 5 minutes. It might be journaling for an hour. It might be thinking of 3 things that I feel grateful for. But every morning when I wake up, I do something to wake up my mind. After that, I do something to wake up my body. That might be 5 minutes of walking. It might be 2 minutes of lifting weights. It might be an hour of going to the gym. But every day there's going to be something to wake up my body. And starting from that place, when we look at how we're going to bed, we look at how we're waking up, then we can start to look at these other phases of the day and start to align our actions with our needs. And that's what I like about this model is that it helps us tune into what we need at these different phases of the day. And a lot of times the first step is recognizing how we are currently meeting that need and then look at how we want to be meeting that need. And the intermediate step there is, let's say the fifth phase of day, Southwest time, we need rest, relaxation. After work, before being social, we need a little bit of self care. And so we looked at, what am I doing right now? It's like, okay, well, as soon as I'm done with work, I feel really tired and I feel stressed. And so I have a drink. Okay. How do I feel after I have that drink? Cool. Is that how I want to feel? Okay, now let's back up and look at, I need self care and rest and recovery at that time of day, in that phase of day. So, how do I want to feel after doing that? Well, I want to feel grounded. I want to feel peaceful in my body. Okay, what is an action I could take at that phase of day that would help me feel grounded, that would help me feel peaceful, that would help me feel rested? So that's kind of the first layer of the work is looking at the rhythm of the day. Then we also get into rhythm of the week, rhythm of the work session. But something that I think is, and we could also sometimes talk about the rhythm of the year, it expands out. But a metaphor that comes up a lot in my group coaching program is this quote from the Buddha, where the Buddha said, "My teachings are a finger pointing to the moon. Don't confuse the finger for the moon." And I really like this a lot because he's basically saying, don't get caught up in my words, don't get caught up in what I'm saying. The goal is for you to look at the moon, right? And the moon is what he's guiding you towards with his teachings. For me, I see this model as a finger pointing to the moon of being in touch with what our brains and bodies need on a day-to-day basis. That a lot of times when I work with clients in this model, they feel like they need to get it right. They need to dial in exactly what time, they do exactly what activities and do those every day. And that is treating this model like the moon. And that's really not it at all. This model is the finger pointing towards the moon. The moon is being connected with what we need, what our brains need, what our bodies need, and being able to give those to ourselves on a moment to moment, day to day basis. And when we're tuned in with our natural rhythms, when we give our brains and bodies what they need, moment to moment, day to day, getting more work done in less time is just a natural outcome of that. Having more peace in our evenings, having more freedom on our weekends, having more connection in our social lives, those things become a natural result of giving our brains and bodies what they need on a moment to moment, day to day basis.
Wow. I suppose, it's really important for us then to become more aware of, when we go to sleep, when we wake up, how we look after ourselves, how we're feeling, because there's different times on different days when I can and can't do specific things. And that's just because, maybe in that moment I feel a little bit overwhelmed. Maybe I'm just tired. Maybe it's hormonal, maybe it's emotional, maybe, and so what you're explaining is we're just trying to kind of get that connection with ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And something that it can be a little difficult to be feeling a certain way, know that we have a need. And then in that moment, when we're feeling strongly and we're having this strong need, to decipher what that need is and how to meet it. That can be a little bit challenging. So, what I often recommend for folks, especially when we're talking about the first phases of the day, waking up our mind and waking up our body, is to create a short menu of choices. Um, Specifically with waking up the mind, waking up the body, the first thing that I do with all my clients is that well, it's really the second thing. Anyway, they create a short list of 3 practices to wake up the mind and 3 practices to wake up the body. And these aren't just any 3 practices. It is on the days when I wake up and I have a lot of capacity and I'm really feeling at my best. How would I want to wake up my mind on that day? Great. Write that down. Then on an average day, if I wake up feeling like I wake up most days, I'm probably not going to be able to do that top tier activity. So, what's a mid level way to wake up my mind that's still accessible to me on my average days? And then, what about the days when I wake up feeling really low? I wake up feeling depressed. I wake up feeling sad. I wake up feeling anxious. I wake up without a lot of energy. What's something that I can still access even on those days? And then we have 3 choices for how we wake up our mind. We do the same thing with how we wake up our body. And then when we wake up in the morning and we don't have a lot of executive function capacity right when we wake up, trying to think of all of the different ways that I could wake up my mind and how I feel right then and what might be most advantageous for me right then. It just becomes too much to think about and we end up not doing anything. So instead, when we have this short menu, we can look at it and say, oh, today's a pretty
There's
average
me.
day. I'm just going to do this one today. And then having a similar menu for lots of different phases of the day. In the evening, when it's time for me to wind down and I don't want to be on my phone and I don't want to be on TV, oh, let me look at this list of 5 things that I like to do in the evening and pick one of these. instead of just trying to, oh, there's a million and five things that I could do right now. That's a really difficult choice to make. But if we narrow it down to three or five, that's a lot easier choice to make in that moment.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah. Yeah, because I when I get overwhelmed, I don't know what to do, so I just switch off completely. But
Mhm.
I think that's great that you kind of your clients you enable them to make a list of what works best in specific. Because there's some days I wake up and I feel like I can change the world. There's other
Mhm.
days I wake up and I'm just like I just don't know what's going on. I'm dazed and confused. I'm tired, even though I slept.
Mhm.
And then there's times when I'm just like, I literally can't do anything. So I think, yeah, that's great that you kind of enable your clients to be able to like write a menu of their needs, their wants and needs in the moment. So that's great.
Yeah, and that's something that anybody can do, you know? I love supporting people with that, but you don't need my support for that. You can create a menu for that on your own. And actually, on my website, oh, I don't actually have it right now. I'm doing some changes on my website and the email opt-in. I used to send people a PDF that has a menu like that, like a much larger menu, and then you can kind of choose some things from there to make your personal menu. That's not on my website right now. But by the time your listeners hear this, it might be. So that could be worth checking. And if it's not there, check back. But that is a free resource that I offer to people, is having a list of potential activities for each phase of day, that can help people make their own choices in that way.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you've got a free resource as well because I understand, we all have to work or pay the bills and stuff, don't we? So I do think it's great when there's kind of support or help for everyone. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have to pay for it. Um, and not that's not because people shouldn't pay for it. That's just because I think that there's like more maybe underprivileged, underrepresented, marginalized people that have no access to any support. And I think if we can like for me, I've uploaded free resources onto my website, which I'm building at the moment, but like my graphic design and my skills are minimal, so it might look like a 5 year old's done it, but I just think it's great when or if people offer like a sliding scale of like income related how much they have to pay to get support and things. So yeah, I love that. Free resources is just so I will post a link to your website to the listeners, and if it's not there when they click on it, then yeah, clearly wait because you're going to upload that again. So yeah, that's fantastic. So thank you for that. So have you got any advice? Have you got any is there anything you'd like people to know who are newly diagnosed, who are waiting to be diagnosed, who just need to hear a pearl of wisdom?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that invitation. Um, I think first I want to say that I think it is important to offer free resources, especially for when we're talking about these conditions that can impact our ability to generate income. Then I think it is really helpful to offer free resources. And I do also offer a sliding scale for my one-on-one client work, so people kind of get to choose what
That's
they want to pay
amazing.
and how they structure the payments and everything.
Yeah.
Um, but then, yeah, one pearl of wisdom I think would be that whatever you're diagnosed with, or if you're not diagnosed, the real question is, what strategies help me? What tools are supportive for me? And finding the creators, finding the podcasts or the books that work for you. I think it's also really important to know that a lot of mainstream advice, like Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, Atomic Habits, um, Eat the Frog, a lot of stuff like that. It's not just that it doesn't work for people with ADHD or autism, it's usually counterproductive to try to implement that stuff. And so I think it's important to remember that if someone offers a tool or a strategy and you try to implement it and it doesn't work for you, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
It just means that that specific tool doesn't work for you right now. It might work for you another time. It might work for you if you had someone holding your hand and supporting you through it. But right now, in your specific situation, that tool doesn't work for you, and that's fine. You can just look for another tool, look for another strategy, find things that work for you, and embrace what works for you. Even if other people think it's strange or other people have never heard of it, if it helps you, then it's helpful for you. And it's important for us to do whatever we need to do to meet the needs of our brains and bodies as long as we're not harming other people.
Yeah, of course. Amazing. Honestly, you've taught me so much as well. Like yeah, I just feel that, um, for me, I've gone on a journey of self-discovery, and it's just about advocating for ourselves, isn't it? And even if we don't feel like we can advocate for ourselves, then find someone who will advocate for us. And just I love the fact that you've said about just learn as much as you can about yourself. It's not just about, you know, being diagnosed with ADHD or autism or anything else. It's just about, how does that show up in your daily life, and how can you then um implement processes that make things much easier. So I could menu. I
Mhm.
was trying to think of the word
Yeah.
menu, but it wasn't. It had gone out of my head. Um, and yeah, I just think, being gentle with ourselves as well, and that kind of self compassion that I think is so important, because we can all beat ourselves up a lot, because we put these unrealistic expectations on ourselves sometimes, and then when we fail, it's like, it's the shame cycle. And it's I think one of the most important lessons that I've learned in the last few years is just that I am I find things challenging, but not because I've got ADHD, just because I find them challenging, or I've got no interest in them. And I think once you find the one thing that you are interested in, then there's no stopping you from moving forward. So yeah, thank you so much, Kai, for your time today, and for your wisdom as well. Like, I just think yeah, you've given me lots to go away and think about, which is what I love about this podcast, because it gives me lots of different things to think about. So yeah, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, is there any last things you'd like to say?
Well, I just want to say thank you for the invitation. It's really been a pleasure to connect with you today. Really enjoyed the conversation. And yeah, just really appreciate the invitation to be here and the great questions that you asked
And thank you for your time as well. Honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure. Like, I thoroughly kind of I'm rarely lost for words. But
today.
but it happened several times today. So yeah, thank you. The listeners or my family are probably thinking, yes, she's been quiet for once, because I do always have a lot to say. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time out to come and talk to me today. And
Yeah,
um,
it's really
you
my
know,
pleasure.
to the listeners, if anything in this conversation has resonated with you, if you need some help, if you'd like to contact Kai, if you'd like to contact me, then please look in the description of the podcast episode, and I will post the links to Kai and his website and the work he does, and other links. My brain has just decided to stop working in that moment. And then yeah, all I would love from you guys is that once I've uploaded, then if you could possibly just share with your network, then that would be amazing. And if you know anyone else that wants to come on and talk about neurodivergence, then please, point them my way. But
Absolutely.
for today. Thank you so much. I feel like you've got such a calming presence. Like I just feel sometimes, I get really excited with conversations and stuff, and that's not a bad thing. But, I feel like we've just gone it's been in a really nice kind of, I don't know. Maybe I sound a bit weird now, but
No, no, I feel like it's not the first time I've heard that. I have to really practice staying grounded. It's very easy for me to lose my grounding. So I practice staying very, very grounded. And yeah, it turns out it has an impact on the people around me. They tend to feel more grounded
yeah,
too.
maybe I need to practice that a bit more than
Yeah.
myself, but yeah. But anyway, for today, thank you so much for your time. And I mean, if you're interested, more than welcome to come back again. If there's
Yeah, that'd
anything
be great.
else you'd
I'd love
want to
to.
talk about,
Sure.
I'm happy to I would love to have you back again.
Sounds
But
good.
yes, to our listeners, I don't know if I've already said this bit, but please like, follow, and share on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple, and what's the other one? Amazon Music. This is the bit I don't do, and a couple of the guests have said to me recently, "You need to be saying this," and I'm like, "No, the podcast is just growing organically." But they're like, "No, you need to tell people to follow and share," and I'm like, "Oh," so I'm trying to do something new. So yes,
Yeah, it
if
really does make a huge difference, especially when a podcast is new. A review on Apple Podcasts makes a huge difference. Liking, commenting, sharing, it really makes a huge, huge difference in how many people see it. So all of that is very much appreciated.
Yes, exactly. So please, listeners, because it just makes me feel a bit uncomfortable. I don't know why, silly, but yeah, please like, share, follow. For oh no, I'm just falling apart for a minute now. Sorry, my brain is just frazzled.